This is it. Episode 19, the end of season number 2. I really can't believe that it's been 2 years or 2 seasons since I started sharing or illuminating the truth about the military of the United States Armed Forces. But if you've been listening for any time, in length of time, you would know that there's 4 concepts that I constantly talk about. These 4 things are critical to understanding whether or not the military is for you. At the top of the list is the Ferris Doctrine. Then is the JAG. I would say JAG would be the number 2. Then there's your civilian courts and the role they play or don't play. And then finally, there are your congressional leaders who pretend to be your friend, but really is the reason why a lot of the military people aren't getting the help they need or the support they need, because it was the Congress who voted in what is known as the Ferris Doctrine. In other words, in simplest form, is preventing service members and their families from holding the military accountable for negligence, wrongful acts, misconduct, or anything between. Where if these events would have occurred as if you were a civilian, and it occurred, for example, doctors who commit malpractice and harm someone, even their death, they would be held accountable, and the family would be able to receive compensation. But that's not how it is with the military. Those are the 4 pillars, the 4 main things that a person really would have to understand, clearly understand, before entering into the military. Hi, my name is Gary. This is Military Illumination. We're a podcast for anyone, mainly high school students, seniors, who's considering entering the military as a career or as a way to get benefits. And also the people who are already in as a way to learn more about what the military is about. In effect, what we do is I talk about things the military don't want you to know about. I illuminate the truth so that you can make an informed decision one way or the other. JAG. Judge Advocate General. What can I say good about them? Nothing. But anyways, that's my bias. And hopefully, once I finish this podcast today, and maybe the future ones, you will understand where I'm coming from. Out of everything that a person can encounter in the military that can have a negative impact on their life after the military, it is the judicial system. It's a legal process within, is known as JAG, the judicial system, Judge Advocate General. The most critical one, the most important thing that I want you to understand is Article 31. That often is misapplied by investigating officers. Article 31 is a compulsory self-incrimination prohibited. That's Section 831, Article 31 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And what it does, it's the same thing as the Miranda warnings for civilians. But this part right here, the Article 31 is the most critical. I can't say it enough. You can read it and you think you're covered, but you're not. You can Google it and look at what it says. Oh yeah, I got this. But you don't. The thing you want to understand about the Article 31 or any language in the military or armed forces is their use of the word may. Their use of the word may. It's different than shall. May is basically a word that it's not clear. It's not definitive. They could or they can't. They could, don't have to. What it means in legal terms, from my perspective, I'm not an attorney, I'm not anything, but what it does in the favor of JAG is that it allows them to give a person a false sense of security when all it does is takes away their rights. It gives you the option to uphold or not hold it to JAG. That's what may is. That's just how may is. They're not have to. Now, if it said shall, then there's no wiggle room. But most of the language, if you look at your contract, if you look at anything inside the Uniform Code of Military Justice, it uses the word may a lot. So let me read this article to you. It says, no person shall to this chapter may compel any person to incriminate himself or to answer any questions, the answer to which may lead to incriminate him. They use him instead of them or they or she, whatever. B. No person subject to this chapter may interrogate or request any statement from an accused or a person suspected of an offense without first informing him of the nature of the accusation and advising him that he does not have to make a statement regarding the offense of which he is accused or suspected, and that any statement made any statements made by him may be used as evidence against him in a trial by court-martial. C. No person shall to this chapter may compel any person to make a statement or produce evidence before any military tribunal if the statement or evidence is not material to the issue and may tend to degrade him. And finally, D. No statement obtained from any person in violation of this article or through the use of coercion, unlawful influence, or unlawful inducement may be received in evidence against him by court-martial, in a trial by court-martial. So just reading that, you probably feel, man, this is good. My rights are going to be protected. Most people don't think that. I thought that. It's solid. It's ironclad. But as you look and as you listen, all of that was just mentioned is routinely denied a person. Routinely. It doesn't even matter. When I say routinely, it happens a lot. It happens more times than you can think of it. A thing called case law. Whenever there's things called case law, or I should say a case study. A case study. What a case study from my perspective is, in my opinion, is that is an example of something that actually happened in real time. So there's theory, which basically means that this compulsory self-incrimination prohibited Article 31, in theory, is supposed to protect somebody. In theory, it's supposed to keep people from being coerced. In theory, their rights are protected if they're not informed of the situation. In theory. But what happens in theory is not the same as what happens in reality. And the reality is what happened. To me, that's a case study. A case law is basically what happened in the courts. And judges and attorneys are guided by that case law. So if you want to understand what military really is about, look at cases. Look at case law. Look at cases and what happened. Not only what happened to the verdict, but what led up to it. And what's led up to it usually ends up in an appeals court. There's two things here. I'm not trying to get too fancy here, but I want you to understand this. I want you to understand that when someone goes to court and their cases went through and there's a verdict, it's done. Usually it's not published. But when a case is, how should I put it, appealed and it goes through the process, then there's a track record of what happened. That's what you follow. I don't want to get too involved. I apologize if I do. I'm running to 10 minutes, but if you're looking at the military and you're trying to get answers and you want to know for yourself, then look at case studies. Look at case law. And it's simply something that's just Google what your question is. A good one is Article 31 violations, Ferris Doctrine. Article 31 violations, and it's gonna come up with something. So I use a lot of case law. I look at a lot of cases that helps me understand what's happening. So I can say, okay, don't trust the JAG because they will trick you, they'll lie to you, they'll do whatever they can to violate your rights to get a confession. People say, oh yeah, Gary's just talking out of the side of his neck again, right? What is that true? That's not true. You go to a JAG officer, they'll say, oh, that's not true. You go to a recruiter and you say, hey, Gary said this. That's not true. They're all liars. All you have to do is to eliminate yourself, is to see the big picture, is just to Google and look at case studies. Now, what you want to understand is this, is non-judicial punishment under Article 15 is just what it says, non-judicial punishment. It's basically the commanders imposing a punishment. There's nothing really connected to the judicial process per se. There's a whole lot of rights that can be in the gray area Once it moves from an Article 15, which basically means that a person, a soldier, a sailor, appealed to Article 15, and they're saying, I don't want this case to be held as an Article 15. I want it to be heard in a court-martial setting. That's what happened with my friend. It was an Article 15 that they decided all their rights had been violated, that if it was held in a court system where due process was part of the process, then they would be okay. Article 15 is the same thing. It's just non-judicial, but they will lie and cheat about that one. And a lot of times, they would coerce you to make a confession. Even if a person is getting Article 15, they shouldn't say anything. They should get a lawyer involved in it. So this Article 31 it's a lot about court-martials. It's judicial process. It's about court-martials. The summary, general, special, those types, and it has different types of criteria for punishment and everything. That's where this Article 31 really comes into play. But anytime you're in the military, anytime you're suspected, anytime you feel that you're threatened, that it's not going good, that discipline is around the corner, stop. Shut your face. Don't say anything. Get an attorney. The challenge of getting an attorney is, unlike the civilian, when you get an attorney, you have a lot to choose from. It's a lot to choose from. And military is very small. And you still don't know whether or not that attorney you have, that defense attorney, is even looking after your best interests. But I'm not here to talk about that. That's what you're up against. It's a system that is not set up to help you. So now we talked about case law, right? Case studies. I said, this is what Article 31 is: compulsory against self-incrimination, prohibited. We know that the language in the MJ, Uniform Code of Criminal Justice, is very vague, right? And it's written in a way that it can be manipulated. Just because the article says that these things are not supposed to happen, anything unlawful, anything coercion, anything influence, any of those things, that's just there. That's just eye candy. It means nothing. When it comes down to the JAG, the judicial system will do anything and everything to trip a person up, get a conviction. The legal process isn't even in their mind. It's corrupt. You can say it is. It happens a lot in civilian as well. It really does. But the difference is that you have recourse as a civilian. So when you enlist, you're not only enlisting, but you're also giving up your rights to a fair trial. So the case law that I'm going to be talking about even today, and also in season 3, comes from the United States Marine Corps Court of Appeals. It was United States versus Brandon K. Flanner. He's a staff sergeant, E6, U.S. Marine Corps. He's the appealee. And his docket number 2134. The case was decided in October 10th, 2023. What I want you to understand is anything that comes through the appeals process takes time. It's a process. It could be years. Just like in this case here, Staff Sergeant Flanner was supposed to have gotten out when this case started. He was held over here. He was involuntarily extended while he's past his date. He's supposed to get out. And I think I mentioned that in a couple of my other podcasts about extensions of a contract. The military can keep you. They can keep you beyond your contract, which means it's pretty sad for this staff sergeant, right? Here you are, you're about ready to get out. Now they're holding you back so they can prosecute you. Think about that. Not only you're not getting out right anytime soon, but if you do get out and this is on your record, any type of job for any major corporation, even especially government, you're not going to get. You just screwed yourself. And I'm not looking at whether the person's guilty or not. And that's not what the argument is. And it's not passing judgment on the person either. They're saying, oh, he shouldn't have did this. He shouldn't have did that, right? That's not what I'm here for. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're using as cases. We're using this case because Staff Sergeant Flanner's legal rights under Article 31 were violated. That's why we're looking at this. And we're looking at what happened. We also know that when I talk about cases that it goes through the appeals process, it had to initially go through the courts, the initial trials. And then there's a process along the way. It can take years. I believe this case was started in 2021. So based on this situation here, he was held in the military for 2 extra years, 2021. And I think that's what they do say. They get up to 24 months. And so what I'm saying is this, was that it's not a slam dunk. It's a long process. It's also a financial process to go through. There's a financial burden. This person had a family. There's also an emotional price you have to pay. It's also just a mental health issue that you're having to face. Not necessarily saying whether or not you're right or wrong, whether you did the crime or not. We haven't got to that point. And what evidently happened with Sergeant Flanner was it was a fraudulent purchase voucher that got him back when he was in Kuwait. We don't know what the truth of the matter is. That's not the issue. And not until you get an investigation to find out what happened can you say whether or not the person was guilty. But if the investigation is faulty, it lacks validity, and this person is put to trial based on evidence that is manufactured or is false, that's criminal. But that is something that happens all the time in the military. Season 3 is going to be all about how the Brigadier General Brett Daugherty and those boys in National Guard, Washington National Guard, did the same exact thing. Textbook. Yes, they were in National Guard, but they were military officers and active before. I say it's textbook. It's my case study to say not only did it happen in 2021, but it happened before that. It happens all the time. That's why you look at case studies. That's why you look at case law when you're deciding whether or not you want to go in the military. And most people would say, you know what? It happened to that person. They were bad. They did something wrong, right? And that is backwards thinking. You play right into the hands of the military when you think that way, because you don't know the circumstances that led to that situation. You don't know how that person was set up. You don't know how the evidence was there. But I want to share with you, Season 3, Washington National Guard, all of that. It plays out all of it. They did Brett Daugherty and those boys. They did it thinking that nothing was going to happen. They did it thinking they weren't going to be held accountable. It was a game to them. But it isn't. It isn't. But you'll learn more. You just follow along with it. Season 3, follow along with it. We'll talk about it. We'll match it up, and you can see. So whenever I cite a case or we talk about it, I want you to understand that's the process. And for every case that makes it to this appeals process, there's probably 100 more that doesn't. It's because either the financial ability of the person, maybe for a lot of reasons. But what hits the criminal appeals courts or the Supreme Court is just the tip of the iceberg. And yes, it may not happen to you, right? But again, when it does, oh Lordy, yeah, it's going to change your life forever. So, in a nutshell, this is what we're talking about. We're looking at the Article 31, compulsory against self-incrimination prohibited, is 10 United States Code 831, Article 31, compulsory self-incrimination prohibited. It's the same as the Miranda warnings. The case study that the case law that I'm going to be referring to all the time, it is going to be the United States Navy Marine Corps Court of Criminal Appeals. It was United States, which is the appealant, and Brandon K. Flanner, Staff Sergeant, E6, U.S. Marine Corps, docket number 202, decided 10 October 23. Now, the appellant was the United States. The appellant was the United States Marine Corps was appealing the ruling by a judge that said that the information that was received from Flanner was gotten without his rights being, how can I put it? It was obtained in violation of Flanner's Article 31 rights, right? Now, this is basically what they call it here. It's an appeal that happened while the court martial was still going on. There's a fancy term for it. I don't know. But it was something serious enough. They're saying that they have to deal with this before the case goes to a verdict, before the case trial was even happened, because it was so important that this has to happen, because it really violated everything. And it means that all the evidence that they received, everything that Flanner said without an attorney in violation of his Article 31 rights should not be admissible. The United States was appealing that. They're appealing it. They're saying, we lied to him when we got him. And here's what they basically lied to him in order to get the confession. I'm not going to go into any deeper. And what it said was, see here, Peely's argued his waiver was neither knowing nor intelligent. In her ruling, the military judge suppressed the interview on the grounds that Peely, that was going to be Flanner, Peely had an inaccurate belief that he could not get an attorney until charges were preferred, and would not have agreed to an interview without having a lawyer present before that inaccurate belief. Interlocutory appeal. The government asserts that the military judge abused her discretion when the suppressed appeals non-custodial pre-preferral. And what happened was this. The judge advocate later informed Peely, this is what you're going to hear, that he would only receive counsel if the charges were preferred, which is incorrect. I'm not going to get into more of that, which is incorrect. So, knowing that information, the Flanner agreed to talk because he thought he couldn't have an attorney. But as we go through it, as we go through this case here, I'm going to go to more detail later on. Flanner was asking for one. He had been asking for an attorney, but JAG said that he wasn't entitled to one, right? That until charges were filed, which is inaccurate. So this is an example of being lied to, misleading, and it's something that the military does very often. So you're always entitled to an attorney. I'm not going to go into there. So that's what happened and what led to this appeals. In short, Flanner was accused of larceny. He was accused of false claims, and he also was accused of forging signatures. The NCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Services, NCIS, basically, and those are basically who are investigating, lied to him, which means that he didn't think he had an attorney, and they got him to talk, and they just let him keep talking. And not having an attorney, not knowing his rights, he incriminated himself. This case was brought by the United States, by the Marine Corps, because the judge ruled in Flanner's favor that his rights was violated, and the manner in which this confession was obtained was illegal. So this case that I'm talking about is being used as an example where the military JAGs and their investigators departments use unfair tactics to get a confession out of a soldier, Marine. That's what everything that I'm saying boils down to. I'll be referring to this case more and more, but you can also look it up if you wanted to. The United States versus Flanner, Navy Marine Corps, Court of Appeals, number 2300134. And this was basically, it was found in his favor, but it was how it happened. And that's what I want you to understand, is what you're up against. The challenge with it is once you're in the military and you're put in a situation where your career, your livelihood is in jeopardy, everything is stacked against you. Not only are you not free to go, you're not free to leave. You have a change in command. They can pull you back in and keep you on base. They can wait you out. They can do a lot of different things that you're not subjected to as a civilian. And through that process, they're able to get confessions out of people, even though they may not have committed the crime, or even though if they went to trial, they would have been found not guilty. That's one thing I want you to think about. That's one thing I want you to understand. I may be all broken up and babbling on. I apologize for that. But what I want you to take from this is this. The military, in its essence, is not what you're used to. It's not the same, regardless of what anybody says. You are at their mercy, right? Ferris Doctrine protects them. You're in a world where the rules don't apply to you. You're in a world where there's no help for you. You enter in a world that has at its core corruptive mentality. But a lot of times people overlook that. They're thinking they can only look at the benefits they're getting. They're going to get supposedly paid for my college, medical and dental for my family, right? But that comes with a price. Not only does it end, but you're not even guaranteed it. And to put your whole life for 8 years in that situation, I don't know why a person would do that knowingly. I don't know why they would. I see a lot of the soldiers and sailors when I go on base. I have the utmost respect for them. This is not aimed at them. This is to protect them. This is to open up their eyes. This is to keep people who are not in from going in. We're not going to have, we'll always be a strong country with a strong military, even if they have to draft. It's better to draft and be open about what happens than to play it off as a career opportunity with the trap door. And that's what they are when they don't. That's what the military is when they don't come up front with your stuff. The use of may and is so open, it's so vague, right? And it doesn't guarantee anything. And even though the Article 31 says that to guard things against illegal activity, it happens. But it happens in a way that it can't be stopped. Season 3, just going to be talking about that. I'm going to be sharing case studies with you in law and what happened. What did Brett Daugherty and the rest of his boys do? It's unimaginable. I still can't believe it. And they got away with it. They got away with it because that's just how it is in the military. And even when you look at Ferris, who was killed in a barracks fire in the 1950s, along with several other officers, or the other people who were subjected to medical malpractice, their family still hasn't been made whole. Their family still is seeking compensation for damages. But it is what it is. So just join me again. I don't know what else to say. I got my coffee. If you want to buy me a coffee, I'll be happy. I just have a conversation. I know sometimes it sounds like I'm really just on this platform, and I probably am, but I really want you to understand what you're getting into, what the reality is. And you're making a decision to go into the military for legitimate reasons. And we have great people who's in the military who does great things. But who's watching out for them? Who's protecting their interests? While they're protecting our country and working long hours, being deployed from wherever, who's protecting them? Who's watching out for them? Who? It's not your congressperson. It's not your courts. Definitely not JAG. It's not the president of the United States. They have no one. Think about that. They serve with no support. I think they should stop saying thank you for your service. I think it should be thank you for your sacrifice. These men and women who serve do so without support from the American people. We put them in that situation and we forget about them. Understand this. If you're hearing this and it resonates with you a little bit, share it with someone. If you know someone who's going through military problems, share with them. Right? Share with them. Let them know that they're not alone. I think that's the biggest thing, is knowing that you're not alone. Knowing that what's happening to you is what the military does. If you got a bright young man or young lady who's considering the military to pay for college, to get a degree, to learn at school, be frank and upfront with them. Share this with them. Tell them, look at other options. Let them know they have other options. If you had a grandpa or grandma who served in the military and an uncle, and you're going to go in, it's a family tradition. Well, you got to do what you got to do. All I know is I did my time, and I wish somebody had told me. I wasted my time. But knowing what I know, because of what Brett Daugherty and his boys, keep saying it, doing Robin Davis, Captain Gregory Goodell, all those people did open my eyes up. And I'm here to be able to share that with you now. And I'm not the only voice. There's a lot of voices out there on the internet. There's a lot. What I would like for some people to come out with is people who were mistreated. Those are the ones I want to come up, but they probably won't. So, anyways, listen to my bonus podcast. We probably come back with season 3 probably in August, and we'll go from there. We'll see what happens. Until then, keep the coffee hot, keep searching for answers, and above all, share my podcast. Thank you. Have a great day.